What if Bronn lost Tyrion's trial by combat? Let's explore the depths of it in the video.
Enough, Vardis! Finish him!
Hearing Lady Lysa's words, Vardis springs forward, slashing his sword upward. Bronn sidesteps the attack, slowly giving ground from these attacks as the knight advances on him. He remains as slow-moving and clumsy as ever, making it seem like Bronn has him right where he wants him. His fingers twitch around his longsword as he waits for the opportunity to strike. That chance comes when the Valeman suddenly bull rushes him, slamming his shield forward. Bronn dances away from that strike and brings his sword down at the knight's neck. However, at the last second, Vardis catches his sword and holds it. Despite his injuries, he manages to keep his blade back. He then follows by sweeping his shield back and forcing Bronn to back away, sacrificing his stance and breaking off the attack. But before he can shift positions, Vardis slashes low at his unarmored legs and bites into his thigh. Bronn screams and falls to one knee. His sword flashes desperately, but Vardis catches it with his shield and then drives his sword forward into the sellsword's throat. His eyes widen, and blood pours from his wound as he slumps forward. Vardis pushes the body down and raises his sword triumphantly. At once, the Vale Lords all break out in cheers, raising their swords and applauding the bloodied knight. The maester runs up to treat his wounds. Lady Lysa looks down triumphantly at Tyrion, who stares up at the corpse in shock. But he does not have long to process this defeat.
It seems the gods did not favor you, imp. Lord Robert, you may now make this small man fly.
Wait. Let's discuss this.
However, two errant guards grab Tyrion over the edge. Despite his efforts to protest, they fall on deaf ears, as they give him one great shove, and he disappears into the abyss, his voice lost to the howling winds of the Vale of Arryn. But as the sounds fade away, the Vale Lords relax. Lord Nestor Royce dips his head and nods.
Lord Arryn, you have been avenged.
The others join him, nodding along and taking a moment to pay their respects. But their relief does not last long. Shortly after, Sir Brendan the Blackfish arrives with news beyond the Bloody Gate. Tywin Lannister has invaded the Riverlands. They have started by raiding border regions, but this was just a prelude, as now thousands of men have poured through the Golden Tooth. They march under the Golden Lion banner, leaving no mistake who they serve, and have pushed deeper into the countryside, seizing castle after castle. The news puts an immediate damper on everything, but Catelyn does not let it stop her.
This is Tywin Lannister's work. Retaliation for our taking of his son.
Then let him rage. In the end, justice was served. Even Lord Tywin cannot deny the validity of trial by combat. Not when I offered him every courtesy and honor his station permitted.
You underestimate Lord Tywin, sister. Though now rescuing his son is now forever beyond his reach, he will not accept it quietly. The Riverlands were burned for his son. This war is to let him show the realm that such actions cannot be done without consequence, which is why we must stop him now.
I agree, my lady. Allow me to lead an expedition force to reinforce the Riverlands. The sight of our knights might send the lions scurrying back to their rock.
Around them, the gathered lords all vow to provide their support. Each one volunteers to join the expedition or promises men, gold, and supplies. The Lady of the Eyrie looks down at them sternly.
Not. If what you say is true, then my knights are needed here to protect Lord Robert. Sir Jaime has already been named Warden of the East. He may well use that title to push for control of the Eyrie. We must remain out of fighting and preserve our strength.
If you think neutrality is an option in this situation, my niece, you are sadly mistaken. Catelyn may have brought Tyrion to the gallows, but it was you who signed the warrant. Tywin sees the Vale is equally responsible for Tyrion's death, and will punish us. He may not invade, but he will see his debts paid off somehow.
All the more reason Robert must have his knights around him.
Not in this case. I have served here as a soldier longer than anyone, and sometimes a good offense is the best defense, such as this. With the Vale and the Riverlands together, we should be able to crush Tywin before he can secure his grip.
Other lords begin to mirror his words, warning that Tywin cannot rampage unchecked. Lords from houses Royce, Corbury, Hunter, and Egan join in, and Lady Lysa bites her lip, seeing no other choice but to acquiesce. She allows an expedition to be sent to reinforce the Riverlands. Preparations are made immediately, and banners are called. Sir Bryden is placed in charge of this army, and Catelyn Stark will go with them. Meanwhile, Sir Nestor is named the Knight of the Bloody Gate. Soon, 15,000 men march through the gate as above, ladies and guards wave them off and shout encouragement. Although they find some trouble with the mountain clans, they pass largely unchecked. But the sight that greets them is far from the great battlefield that they were expecting. Instead, they find the borderlands reduced to fire and smoke. Entire towns are laid to waste by Tywin's attacks. Villagers are left to wander the ruins, and whole raiders move through the countryside unchecked. Sir Brendan puts a quick stop to this. Though in the service of the Vale, his heart remains in the Riverlands, and he begins launching a retaliatory attack. He knows these lands well, and begins leading the Valemen through the crossings and back roads that only the river folk know about. This allows him to ambush the Lannisters' vanguard, which has advanced far ahead of Tywin's forces. These scouts and raiders soon disappear, freeing villages and taking over other important river crossings that help the Valemen inch ever closer to the Lord of Castle Rock. While they are careful to avoid battle, their mere presence is enough to give Tywin pause, and he had not accounted for them to arrive so quickly. More importantly, some lords begin to grumble amongst themselves. While they were eager to fight the River Lords, fighting against the veteran Vale Knights is another matter, especially since they have yet to fully subdue the Riverlands. Though Tywin continues to assure them that their cause is just, others are less certain. He says that his son was wrongfully kidnapped and executed for a crime he did not commit, and that the Vale and River Lords had conspired together. It is entirely untrue, but it also rings hollow. At the end of the day, no one can deny that Tyrion was given his rights. He was allowed a fair trial and even allowed to name a champion. Some silently grumble that it was Tyrion's fault for recruiting a common sellsword to fight for him instead of waiting for his father. Others say that their wrongs have already been avenged after burning the Riverlands, and that Tyrion is hardly worth so much effort. But none dare say this to Tywin, who continues to hold onto the Westerlands through sheer force of will. Meanwhile, Sir Brendan continues to shadow the Lannister army, keeping away from the battle, and then approaching the eastern river lords such as House Mooten, Root, and Goodbrook, which rally to his side and begin sending men. All of this is troubling news for Tywin, but none of it compares to the chaos in the capital. While these armies continue to shadow one another, Cersei moves to consolidate control in the capital by arresting Ned Stark. Rather than placate the Northmen, it only angers them as they call their banners under the command of Robb. Hearing this news, Catelyn breaks off from the main army and instead journeys north to meet up with her son. If he intends to go to war, then Catelyn's presence can help him, as they will be better able to coordinate their forces and help Robb understand what the Valemen intend to do. She secretly takes a ship from Maidenpool to White Harbor. From there, she is escorted by Manderlys to her son's host in Moat Cailin. There, she finds him waiting for her alongside his bannermen. Robb immediately orders his men to leave as he discusses the events of what happened in the north and the capital. What does take Robb off guard is the news that the Valemen are offering their aid.
When I set out, I wondered whether my army would be enough to free Father, but the Valemen's presence can make a world of difference. I'm glad to hear they support our cause.
Indeed. Their presence is a great boon, but we cannot waste it. I hope you have a plan, because though Blackfish has done excellent work in underdoing the Lannisters' control, we are still in a difficult position.
I do. I plan on sending part of the Northern Army to reinforce the Valemen. Together they should have the manpower to challenge Tywin directly. A second smaller force will ride to Riverrun and take Sir Jaime unawares.
It is a bold plan, but one Catelyn likes. Together they begin to decide who will command which army. Robb and Catelyn decide to go with the swifter army, while leaving Roose in command of the larger force, telling him about the plan and coordinating with the Valemen however he can. With that decided, both armies march out for their respective tasks. The Green Fork churns with mud and blood as Roose Bolton's silent host moves through the morning mist. Banners of the Dreadfort hang limp in the damp air. Beside the flayed man are the banners of houses Serwyn, Hornwood, Manderly, Glover, and Karstark. They had marched through the night, driving men hard, but it seemed to have paid off, as when they crossed the river, they saw the old Lion's camp. Tywin Lannister rides high atop a black courser, his armor golden and proud, unmarred by battle. Beside him, Sir Kevan surveys the battlefield with a cold, practiced eye. But both men tense as horns sound across the hills, not from the Stark lines. The Valemen. Sir Adam Marbrand reported that they were in the area, but he had hoped they would be further away. Tywin quickly orders his army to march, ordering them to crush the Starks first and drive them back so they may deal with the Valemen next. Soon enough, the armies of the Westerlands form up, near 20,000 strong. The vanguard rushes forward under the command of Sir Gregor and moves to hit them from the right, working to soften them up first while the rest of the army forms up. Though the Mountains' army is small, many Northmen are exhausted and struggle against this charge. Still, they manage to halt this attack just as the rest of the army moves in. Thousands of footmen come crashing against the Stark center, leaving them thrusting spears and hacking with axes as both sides struggle to drive the other back. While the Northmen are tired, they are still ferocious and refuse to yield to any ground. But Tywin has the advantage in heavy horses. Thousands of knights held back by Sir Adam Marbrand suddenly come rushing forward. Their charge hits the Stark flank, and the line begins to fold inward. Just as victory is within sight, swift riders descend like a thunderclap from the east. Thousands of them pour from the rivers, silver and blue banners flashing in the dawn. The Valemen arrive, with Brandon having heard of this attack in advance and moved his swiftest riders to support them. Tywin barely has time to react.
Hold the right flank.
But it's too late. Roose Bolton has baited the lion forward, and now the trap snaps shut. The Vale Knights slam into the Lannister lines as Bolton's infantry surges forward, the arrival of the Valeman giving them a second win. No cries, no fury, only cold purpose. Roose himself rides with his guard, flaying the Lannister center with surgical precision. Chaos erupts. Tywin's knights try to wheel and respond, but they are caught between the cold bite of the north and the fury of the Vale. Drums beat, horns scream, men die by the hundreds. Sir Adam Marbrand falls first, dragged from his horse and gutted by a pike. Kevin tries to rally a pocket of guards, but is run through by a Northman's spear. Tywin himself is unhorsed, and a stroke from a hammer dents his gorget, and then another takes him across the face. The Lion of Castle Rock is dragged down in a crush of dying men and trampled beneath steel boots. Elsewhere, the gates of Riverrun thunder open as Robb Stark leads the charge himself. Grey wind howls through the corridors as Lannister soldiers falter outside the Tully stronghold. Robb's men surge like a tide, bolstered by the Freys and the Blackwoods. Jaime was captured earlier in Whispering Woods, and without their commander, the Westermen are thrown into disarray. Now they face off against attacks on all their camps. The Starkmen and Riverfolk swarm across the camps, butchering anyone unfortunate enough to get in their way. The siege ends in blood and ash. With their two main armies crushed, the Lannister offensive grinds to a halt, but it is not entirely crushed, as isolated groups remain. Some bannermen were off and managed to avoid the battle, others managed to escape, some in large enough numbers that they could be a nuisance individually, and a threat united. Robb and the others are fresh from victory and eager to wipe them out, but Sir Brendan has another idea. He knows that most of them likely want nothing but to go home, but they were bound by their liege lord to serve, so he decides to give them a way out. Heralds and outriders are sent to the surrounding areas to repeat a message to these wayward lords.
You followed a lion, and now the lion is dead. His cubs are gone. Tyrion Lannister was given a fair trial, combat by his own choice. A champion volunteered to face him, and he accepted. You call that justice. So do we. If you swear no further war against the North or the Riverlands, you may live.
This message soon spreads across all four corners, and soon Riverrun begins to receive letters. These same bannermen chose to surrender rather than fight. They've decided they've done their part and wish to return home. Each one takes a vow that they will no longer take up arms against the Riverlands, and in exchange are allowed to march home. Ravens fly, messages scatter. Castle Rock goes quiet. In King's Landing, Queen Cersei stares at the horizon from Maegor's Holdfast. Her father is dead. The Riverlands are lost. Riverrun flies the direwolf and trout. And now, the Vale has risen. They are surrounded. But it isn't the Starks whom they should be worried about. From the shadow of Dragonstone, Stannis watches all of this in surprise. He has been keeping close tabs on the happenings within the Seven Kingdoms, and these events were surprising to say the least. Not only was Tywin defeated, but his entire army was scattered, and now the North is victorious. He was warned against attacking the capital when he had so few forces to march, but now things have changed. As the Starks mop up what remains of the Lannisters, Stannis calls his fleet in banners. This leaves him with a small army to take the city, and his advisors are torn on what to do.
Your Grace, the Lannisters are broken. Their army is scattered, and their leaders are dead on the field. Their only allies must cross the Riverlands or sail around the continent to reinforce them. Never again will the capital be this vulnerable. It is a peach ripe for plucking. And yet we can only muster 5,000 men to attack the capital. Men can be in the Groundlands. Once they see the Lannister power broken, they will rush to join us. I advise against such actions, Your Grace. A smuggler knows that cargo is never just lying around and waiting to be plucked. Though we may capture the city, we lack the means of holding it.
Your men speak of cargo as if this city is but a crate of onions. This city is a symbol of kingship. Whoever holds it will be recognized as king.
A city that cannot feed itself is like a king without a kingdom.
And yet it is desired by all, including the king's brother, who gathers his swords in Storm's End. Should he be allowed to capture it, then King Stannis shall be pushed aside.
Renly already outnumbers me. If I'm to allow him to gain King's Landing as well, he may as well rule the Seven Kingdoms. No. Prepare all the ships to set sail.
And indeed, the fleet does begin to sail. Not towards King's Landing directly, as Stannis does acknowledge Sir Davos's concerns about their troops, and instead lands in Duskendale. The town is large enough to allow the army to disembark, and the town recalls how Tywin had helped put out the Defiance, leaving them with little love for him. House Riker is quick to pledge their swords to Stannis, and other houses begin to follow. With the Lannisters defeated, many of the Crownland houses see defending the Lannisters as a lost cause. Some already harbored sympathies, and others now see it as the best way moving forward. Houses Faring, Massey, and Chittering all pledge their name to Stannis, swelling his ranks by thousands more. It is a comparatively small army, but it does give him more means to besiege the capital, and he does just that as his fleet surrounds the harbor. King's Landing lies trapped on both sides, leaving them unable to effectively gather reinforcements. With the road already long cut off to them, the capital begins to starve, and the people grow restless. They never had any love for Cersei or Joffrey, and talks of mutiny begin, especially as probing attacks begin. He does not commit his entire force into the attack, but makes his presence known through smaller attacks. War galleys, ships sink, and they try to capture small islands while men launch raids onto the walls. These are far from successful, but they add more pressure on the city. The City Watch lacks the discipline of real soldiers, and as these attacks begin, they finally break, and some open a postern gate for his army to strike. Soon enough, Stannis' men pour through the streets as Goldcloaks throw down their spears and surrender, some running back to their barracks, and others guiding Stannis to Lannister forces in hopes of winning favor. Soon enough, the Red Keep is surrounded and falls before their attack. With the city in Stannis' hand, the rest of the Crownlands hurries to bend the knee, and these lords gather as he crowns himself atop the Iron Throne. The sight of this sends shockwaves across the Seven Kingdoms, especially to Renly, who has also crowned himself in Highgarden. But Stannis' coronation and age give him more legitimacy. More importantly, it leaves him free to confront the Starks, where he sends a message to them, telling them to bend the knee like the rest of the Crownlands. This news is met with mixed reception in Robb Stark's camp. Many, especially those in the Vale, see no problem with this idea. After all, Stannis is Robert's brother, and when Stannis reveals the incest allegations against Cersei and Jaime, it only hardens the resolve as they learn that Jon Arryn had personally helped in the investigation. To men like Jon Royce and Lord Belmore, this makes it their obligation to support Stannis for his role in fueling their late liege lord's investigation. However, some Northmen are less certain. Though Roose Bolton and Robert Glover both believe in supporting Stannis, others like Greatjon and Rickard Karstark are flush with victory and suggest a radical solution, declaring northern independence. The death of Ned Stark hardened their hearts to the south, and many would rather risk war with Stannis than bow to another southern king. This puts Robb in a complicated position, as many suggest declaring independence. It would mean making an enemy of both Renly and Stannis and prolonging this war. Worse still, it would also mean fracturing his support.
Their support is growing. Many of the lords like Galbert Glover, Greatjon, Rickard Karstark, and Mage Mormont all believe I should take my crown. Even Theon said it wouldn't be a bad idea since I won it with the Iron Price.
And what do you think, Robb?
I think my father accepted power, and he ended up dead. I am barely old enough to be a lord. What would I know of kingship?
Not to mention it would prolong the war. Stannis would not be pleased to hear you declared independence when he requested fealty. That is not even mentioning Renly, who rules from Highgarden and is marshalling his strength. Would the Northmen, Riverlords, and Valemen be enough?
Just the river folk and northerners. I've been speaking to some of the knights of the Vale, and all agree they will not support any independence bid. If you accept this crown, you must fight for it without them.
My sister would not allow herself to be strong-armed a second time. And still, we cannot fully ignore what they say. Some rumors have troubled some northern lords about Stannis.
Rumors?
Aye, that he is the slave to some foreign witch, one who worships a strange god and is said to call upon unnatural powers. That she summons these powers by burning men alive. Good, godly men.
Are those rumors true?
I cannot answer that. But they are real enough to your men, who worry that she may influence how they will be ruled. Even the rivermen worry about her trying to force her alien god upon them.
Still, I am not keen on fighting the Baratheon brothers. I do not quarrel with them.
Then I suggest you answer no. Though Stannis might hold the capital, he lacks the manpower to challenge him militarily. We may use that to convince him to accept some protections in exchange for our fealty.
It is a good plan, and Robb agrees to go with it. When the delegation arrives demanding Robb's oath, the young lord readily agrees to negotiate and offers terms. He says that he will bend the knee and acknowledge Stannis as king, as well as condemning the Lannisters for not just their invasion, but also the incest. However, in exchange for this, they wish for Stannis to promise not to force the Red Woman's religion on them. Along with that, he wishes for Stannis to help rebuild the Riverlands, which were devastated by the war. He ends this by reminding Stannis that even Tywin allowed the North to worship the old gods. When the king hears this, he is initially incensed by this haggling. But with Davos's advice, he does see that what they are asking is reasonable and agrees with him. In exchange, he says that they must help him defeat Renly if he refuses to come to terms. Robb and Catelyn are both dismayed to hear this, as both had wished to end the war now and avoid having to fight with the Baratheons. They have no way of actually refusing him, as this is the role of a liege lord, and both can do nothing beyond hoping that the brothers can make common cause. Unfortunately, it seems that is not to be, as Renly laughs off these proposals. Even with Stannis' position in the capital, he knows his alliance with Robb is still new and tenuous. More importantly, he still has the larger army with the Stormlands and the Reach backing him. Instead, he offers to let Robb simply go home if he recognizes him as king. The offer is tempting, but Robb refuses this, having already committed to Stannis' cause. Soon enough, the orders are sent, and Robb gathers his army, some 45,000 strong of the Riverlords, Valeman in the north, and they cross into the Reach's territory. With Renly making his march to King's Landing through the Stormlands, the Reach is only protected by Mace and about 10,000 men. These men are easily pushed aside in Fairmarket when they meet Robb in battle. Mace is driven back and is only saved by the arrival of nightfall. However, half his army fell in the field that day. Around him, some of his advisors suggest a scorched earth tactic, but he rejects this. The wealth of the Reach is in their grain, and to burn it now is to burn their ability to continue the war. Instead, he calls for the rest of his banners, trying to raise whatever troops he can while sending word to Renly, warning him about the attack. With his forces camped near Bitterbridge, the king decides to detach a portion of his army under the command of Randyll Tarly to hold the bridge and drive back the Northmen. This proves to be a smart choice, as Robb now cannot chase after Renly, and the initial probing attacks on Bitterbridge fail, as the Lord of Horn Hill fortifies the castle and bridge. However, Stannis has not been idle either. He manages to muster 15,000 men from the Crownlands and some Stormlanders, who begin to have second thoughts. While not large enough to confront Renly, he still has the royal fleet, which lets him bypass his brother entirely. He instead lands his forces close to Blackhaven and rides up the marches, opening a second front in the Reach. While it leaves King's Landing undefended, it also cuts off Renly from his main base. Stannis marches south through the Stormlands, using his smaller army to raid faster and approach the castle before Renly even realizes it. When the younger Baratheon does learn about it, he impulsively whirls around with his larger host and rushes to confront him. However, in his eagerness, Renly outpaces his infantry, and his cavalry pulls ahead. Once Stannis arrives, he uses Melisandre's shadow assassin to take out Randyll Tarly. The Lord of Hornhill is busy planning that night when a shadow appears and plunges a dagger through his back, but it does not stop there. As it disappears, it begins setting fire to tents and cutting off horse lines. For the Reachmen, this throws their camp into complete chaos. At the moment, the Baratheons strike in the camp, falling upon them like starving hounds upon a helpless lamb. Thousands fall, and the bridge is soon taken as Lord Caseway yields to the king. When Renly arrives, he tries to reverse the tide by charging Stannis. However, his cavalry is met with the disciplined shield wall of the Valemen in north, who hold against their charge and beat them back. Renly tries several more times, but once they have full commitment, Stannis has the Knights of the Vale charge down the flanks and surround them on three sides. The pressure of this sudden attack sends the Stormlanders into a panic. Many break off from the battle and flee to the rear, trying to escape, but this only creates a bottleneck. Renly tries desperately to rally his men, but is knocked off his horse and trampled to death. By the end, the Stormlanders quietly yield to Stannis, and the Reach slowly offers its swords to him, with Mace barely managing to cling on to Highgarden when Davos advises treating him magnanimously. Still, it leaves Stannis as the sole claimant to the Iron Throne. Robb and his allies return to their homes, and this puts Stannis in a difficult position. Although he is undisputedly the king, many of his men are not diehard supporters and see their goals as accomplished. The North has avenged Ned, the Riverfolk have defended their homes, and the Valemen have seen Jon Arryn's work complete. This leaves Stannis without a major support base to draw from as he begins his rule. For the first few months, everything seems to go according to plan. Stannis manages to rule fairly and justly, focusing his efforts on rebuilding the realm. Even the areas he's invaded receive his support to rebuild, and as he directs money from the treasury to help the small folk and nobles build as well. Most of these efforts are focused on the Riverlands, which were most badly damaged during the campaign. True to Stannis' word, he makes no effort to push the Lord of Light there, instead allowing the small folk to worship the faith of the Seven. However, while Stannis might not be pushing it, his allies certainly are. The Queen's men, flushed from their victory, see the Riverlands as a place to begin gathering converts for their new faith, and they accompany grain wagons, oversee the building of temples, and drive out bandits. Stannis makes no effort to stop them either, as he sees no reason why they cannot worship their god. Unfortunately, not everyone thinks that way, and the Sparrows begin to emerge. To them, Stannis is the worst of these lines of kings. Robert was drunk and a whoremonger, while Joffrey was cruel and violent. The answer to that is to bring the realm back to its godly roots, but Stannis bringing a new god is an affront to everything they stand for. Clashes between both zealots begin to break out, as both sides visit the efforts of the other and egg each other on. Sparrows smash icons of the Lord of Light, harass traveling Queensmen, and frighten merchants who visit villages. Meanwhile, Queensmen vandalize septs, chasing off septums, and mock the Sparrows' appearance. Some of these even turn violent, as brawls break out between them, leading to some deaths. Stannis responds quickly by having aggravators put to death regardless of their beliefs, and hanging them on display. But some of the more pious small folk don't think that this is good enough. Others are troubled by the growing violence in their lands. They petition Stannis to take action, but the king will not slaughter entire groups, especially if they have done nothing wrong, and orders both sides to make amends. He even visits the High Septim, who publicly condemns the Sparrows for their actions in an attempt to present a united front. Unfortunately, that High Septim is known for his corruption, and many reject him, calling him a pawn for the Fire Demon. Among those is a man known as the High Sparrow. He decides to take matters into his own hands and urges the Sparrows to fight back, and soon, fighting breaks out in the Riverlands. Sparrows form bands similar to the Faith Militant of old, attacking the Queen's men with the intent to kill. Within weeks, hundreds are dead, and many towns are destroyed by the fire temples being constructed. They gather supporters from the small folk, taking over relief efforts to gain allies. This time, Stannis can no longer ignore it and sends orders to his bannermen to crush the Sparrows. While some obey or are urged on by the Queen's men, others balk at this task. They had asked Stannis to do this before the Lord of Light, warning that this was going to happen. Because of that, some refuse to act, withholding their men or thinking of excuses to avoid getting into it. This forces Stannis to act on his own, who gathered his personal army and riding into the Riverlands and Reach, where these efforts are strongest, and begin to root out the Sparrows. And with this army comes the Queen's men, who point out Sparrows they recognize and pull them out for execution. In some cases, the worst offenders are even burned at the stake. The bay at Meereen is quiet, save for the soft lapping of waves and the distant cries of gulls. Daenerys Targaryen stands at the end of a black cliff, the sea wind snapping her silver-blonde hair against her face. Behind her, the painted table gleams with scattered reports, parchment brought from spies, sailors, or old allies. Fires in the Riverlands, hundreds dead, Queen's men butchered in temples, their bodies strung up by roadside septs. The Sparrows strike caravans, torch outposts. King Stannis leads the campaign himself, but some of his lords refuse him. Daenerys closes her eyes. She hears the screams of Meereen again, not from her enemies, but from the innocents caught between them and the sons of the Harpy. She remembers the charred bones of children laid by her feet by frightened villagers, the price of misjudged mercy.
This is no longer politics. It's faith burning the realm.
We have strength, ships, soldiers, dragons. You waited for the right time. It is now. Stannis is no Joffrey, but he is brittle. He clings to justice even when it cuts him. The Vale does not love him. The Riverlands bleed. And now...
There is another letter from a man called the High Sparrow. He offers support, weapons, men, prayers. He calls your coming a scourge to cleanse fire worship from the sword of Westeros.
He'd call Rhaegar a demon. Don't trust a pious man with a sword.
I don't need his trust. I only need his followers. Prepare the fleet. We strike where Stannis cannot hold. We strike while his gods war with each other.
The ships come at dawn. Black sails stretch from horizon to horizon. The Targaryen banner, red dragon on black, whips high in the winds as Daenerys' invasion fleet makes landfall on Tarth and the surrounding Stormlands. Stannis had expected her to strike the Crownlands first, but instead she lands where loyalty to House Baratheon is weakest. Lords who once bent the knee to Renly now open their gates. Some are bought, others simply cower. Those who do remain loyal are now pushed back or watch as dragons fly overhead. Daenerys rides Drogon above Summerhall, a ruin where she lights the blackened stone with fire and declares a new dynasty will rise from its ashes. Among those who watch are Dornishmen sent ahead by Prince Doran, assuring them of their loyalty to House Targaryen. The realm watches in awe and terror, but King Stannis Baratheon does not wait. From Harrenhal, he leads a lightning strike down the God's Eye, splitting Daenerys' forces before they can consolidate. The rest of the Dornishmen are checked by the garrison he installed at House Tarly. Many Marcher lords join him, as though they fear the Lord of Light, and the Dornish and Targaryen threat is known to them. Stannis' understanding of terrain, supply lines, and discipline yields victory after victory. Several of her unsullied detachments are lured into traps and slaughtered. His ships, sailing from Blackwater Bay, cut off grain convoys meant for Daenerys' newly acquired footholds, even as she secures the Stormlands and moves into the Reach. A key moment comes at Weeping Town, where Stannis uses a decoy of himself to bait Viserion into ambush. Dozens of scorpions rise from concealed wagons. The beast is wounded in the wing, forcing it to retreat in smoke and blood. This takes him out of the war, and is Stannis' greatest victory. But Stannis fights more than dragons. From Old Town to the Neck, bands of sparrows rise. Wearing rags, wielding stolen blades, they strike in the night, torching fire temples, ambushing queensmen, murdering red priests. Some towns hang both sparrow and queensmen corpses from the same tree, desperate for peace. But with this war, they strike more than just the queensmen. They strike at the king himself, ambushing supply lines and hitting isolated pockets. This is all under the command of the High Sparrow, who takes a string of villages, denying their supplies to Stannis as he calls Daenerys the Cleansing Fire. Stannis orders harsh reprisals, but many lords disobey. In the Reach, House Hightower refuses to send men. In the Crownlands, lesser lords openly sabotage his orders. Ravens stop arriving from some towns in the Riverlands. Only 2 regions remain completely loyal. The Vale, led by Jon Royce, sends knights down the mountain pass, their banners flying beside Stannis's. Robb Stark, now Warden of the North, marches through the Neck with thousands of seasoned men. He has no love for R'hllor, but he despises chaos and has made a vow. Robb meets Daenerys' captains at Ashford. Grey Worm and the Unsullied hold formation, but Robb's cavalry smashes through the flank, driving the freedmen back, who run in panic at the sight of Greywind. The battle is bloody and inconclusive. Daenerys does not burn Robb, not when his troops are so close. The fighting lasts until the night, when the Northmen slip away. This army helps ensure Mace Tyrell's loyalty and holds the Dornish advance. Meanwhile, the Vale rides into the Stormlands, reinforcing the faltering Baratheon position. They secure many of the Loyalist castles and ride hard to reinforce Stannis in the marches. A forced march allows them to surprise the Dornish, who are driven back by the speed of the Vale Knights. And though Stannis still lives, winning battles and punishing traitors, he cannot patch the cracks in the foundation. The war has ground into ash and attrition, and neither side wants this. Villages smolder, crops rot in fields, riverlords hide behind stone walls, unsure which monarch will rule tomorrow, and Stannis Baratheon has reached the edge of patience. His army is encamped in the Kingswood outside King's Landing. Loyal Vale Knights and Northmen from the heart of his host, while the Queen's men chant at the outskirts. The Lord of Light, they say, has one more miracle to give.
We have their names. Nobles of Dawn, Lord Fowler. Let the flames speak, your grace. This war started because of acts of fanaticism like that. Now you would have me burning men openly. Proudly. When you don't, the realm turns against you. They invite dragon queens and slave soldiers to their shores. The realm is falling apart at the seams. It must be burned to the ground and reborn anew.
That night, 3 Dornish captives are burned alive. Their screams pierce the trees. The Queen's men call for more, but the sight terrifies the non-believers. Some tremble and doubt themselves, and others outright defect as they slip away in the night. Dawn rises as Daenerys' host marches south to confront him. With her ride Sir Barristan Selmy, Grey Worm, and strong Balwas. Stannis arrays his forces not in a single line, but in mixed, shifting formations designed to confuse the enemy and hug Daenerys' ranks, making the dragons useless for fear of killing their own. As cavalry slams together and screams across the hills, Rhaegal sweeps overhead, breathing fire in the distance, but Drogon holds back, circling, waiting for the command. These might nip at Stannis' heels, but they do not stop him. Meanwhile, Stannis has his artillery and archers fire upon Drogon, the arrows and quarrels flying overhead, and some missing by a few inches. He whirls through and moves around, avoiding these strikes as Daenerys directs him to those forces. She flies low as some try to escape through the tree line, but this is just what Stannis wanted. From the shadows of the forest, something inhuman emerges, wreathed in smoke, shaped like a man. The shadow assassin leaps from the trees towards Daenerys, her back exposed. Her attention is on the archers, and the scorpions had drawn her close. She does not see it coming, but Viserion does. The wounded dragon barrels between her and the assassin. He rises from the hills, where they kept him hidden, and flaps his wings. Though slower than before, it still manages to fly and begins to approach Drogon. The shadow assassin raises his dagger. Viserion catches it in his jaws. The two collide midair in a terrible impact. Shadow clings to Viserion's hide as he thrashes. He crushes it, but as Daenerys looks up and she sees the archers disappearing in the woods, spotting a hidden camp just beyond a small ridge, Daenerys sees it too and rides hard after the Shadow's trail. She approaches Ser Barristan, who is commanding her reserves, and directs him towards the area. Ser Barristan orders a charge as they cut through the Queensmen and reach Stannis' command tent, where the king, in battered black armor, awaits with sword drawn. He does not flee. Their swords meet in a clash of steel and fury. Barristan, older but swifter, finds openings, but Stannis fights like a cornered beast. He cuts through any of Daenerys' warriors who intervene, but soon he finds himself pressed by Ser Barristan, each step driving him back. Finally, Barristan faints, rolling under a swing, and drives his sword through Stannis' side. The Baratheon king falls to his knees. He does not cry out, and then slumps over. With Stannis dead, the remnants of his army scatter. The Queen's men fight to the last, but most lords surrender or are captured. The Vale Knights lay down their arms with honor. The North regroups and steels themselves for what is to come, but Daenerys does not arrive with fire and fury. Instead, she arrives with terms.
You served King Stannis with honor. I will have the same for your life. Pledge your sword to me, and you shall live.
I knew Stannis. He believed in something. So do I. You have my sword, Your Grace.
With that, the war comes to an end, as no one dares challenge Daenerys further, and most houses quickly fold before her army. The Sparrows now celebrate the retreat of the Queensmen, but Robb advises her to not trust them, and, at the earliest opportunity, appoints a more moderate High Septim who helps disarm them. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the Seven Kingdoms and beyond, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel.